Sounds good. Welcome everybody to our Stitchcraft Marketing office hours. This is an opportunity for us to present some sort of little lesson for you guys in a short 15-20 minute presentation. This week, we're going to be talking about customer avatars and attitudinal segmenting. I know here at the agency, we talk all the time about customer avatars, and some of you might already really be familiar with the concept and may have even done the exercise that we walk clients through on a regular basis. But I think the attitudinal segmenting might be new for some of you, so I'm looking forward to introducing that concept. So first, I just like to go over what you'll learn in the lesson today. We're going to review what is a customer avatar, or often referred to as a buyer persona. We're going to talk about how to identify them for your business. I threw in a couple of pandemic considerations because that's sort of changed the landscape of what you need to be thinking about in terms of your customer. And then I want to do a quick intro to what we call attitudinal segmentation, which is kind of a form of understanding your customer, but is based on a different set of criteria, which we'll go over. So first, I want to just open it up to the folks that are in the live session today. How many of you actually have an avatar? And if you do have one, do you have a name for the avatar? So for the folks that are on, you can either just unmute yourself and shout out, or you can type it in the chat. We've got Glennie and Susan. Do either of you have an avatar?
We've worked on them internally, but we don't have one set avatar yet.
Okay. And then Susan, you're shaking your head no, so you don't have an avatar. So hopefully this exercise will help you get to that place where you can actually figure out who it is.
We talked about it, but I never really did anything with it like normal. So now maybe I should. So
yeah, and we'll give you a little worksheet at the end of this that you can print out and do the little exercise on your own and hopefully come up with a name for your avatar. All right, so just a quick review here. A client avatar or a buyer persona goes over several different what I call quadrants. One is going to be your demographics, your characteristics, your hopes, and your pains. And these are all from the perspective of your customer, who your typical customer is. So when we're talking about demographics, I feel like everybody's fairly familiar with what these are. It's going to be like age, for example, if she's 35 to 45, male, female, what their I'm sorry, what their ethnicity is. So in this particular example, our Jackie is going to be a Black woman aged, let's say 40. And then you might also look at what the class is, upper middle class or upper class, whether or not they have a college degree. And these are typically demographics that you would find in a regular dashboard. So if you go into the back end of Facebook, for example, they'll tell you all these things about your users because they collect that data on a regular basis. So we're going to teach you how to pull some of that out. So for example, if you are using Facebook as one of the main tools for your advertising, you can use the demographics section to filter down so that you're talking only to your customer avatar. We also take a look at Jackie's characteristics. We want to know, for example, if she is, what her skill level is. So in this case, we're going to say she's an advanced beginner skill in knitting. She's also health conscious. She might have an urban aesthetic. And then we move on to hopes. And I love this one. It's not usually included in customer avatar exercises, but I think it's really important because I want you to be the person that inspires Jackie because you are aware of what her hopes are. So for example, she might want to improve her knitting. She wants to achieve work-life balance, and she wants to make a contribution in the world. And then same with pain points. I want to know, for example, that Jackie doesn't have a lot of time. She might be budget conscious. She might not be very confident in what her knitting skills are. And again, all of those pain points are things that you can capitalize on in all of your social media and your advertising efforts. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that here in just a minute. So I often get this question of like, well, how do I describe Jackie? How do I get all that information? And my most common answer is you just really have to keep your ears and your eyes open. It's all out there for you in plain sight if you just have your ear to the ground and you listen. Social media posts and comments are a great place for you to learn more about your avatar. Stalking and sleuthing about what people want. And I'm going to walk you through a little exercise on how to do that. Reviews of your brand and your products are another great place to look. And of course, face-to-face, if you're the kind of business that has a brick and mortar shop, like Susan, I know you do, or if you're going to shows and events, take the time to chat with your customers and ask them about some of the things that we just covered. And then lastly, even if you don't have in person, you can have a conversation with your customer on the phone when they're placing a phone order, or if they're in an email correspondence with you. Those are other great places for you to learn more about who they are. We also encourage clients to look at SurveyMonkey surveys. You can actually put together a really quick and dirty, 5-minute survey that includes some of the questions. Like you might ask, what your skill level is in knitting or spinning or something like that. And you have what's called a Likert scale that goes from 0 to 5, and your survey respondents will indicate what their skill level is, so that for the most part, your customer avatar might be an advanced beginner, for example. And if you don't ask those questions, you just never know. So surveys are a great way to utilize that. Newsletter links is another place to dig around to see what your customer is interested in. You can look to see in the back end of your statistics where their interests lie based on what the clicks are. So if, for example, you do several newsletters in a row and you're talking about socks and sock supplies or patterns or yarns specific for that, and you're getting an inordinate amount of clicks on that section in a consistent way, well, then you know that Jackie's really interested in those kinds of projects. So you know to speak her language by talking about that more often. Back-end data is a great place to look. Like I mentioned earlier, your social media channels like Facebook have so much robust data that you can pull from. Google also can be a great place for you to mine. I'm going to just let Tammy in here real quick. And then the Google backend is also another great place. There's some pretty basic demographic information that you can gather from Google. Where they're coming from. They also have some geographic stuff on the back end of Google, which can be helpful as well. So the second poll time here. How many of you have ever sleuthed for your customers on Facebook or other social channels, for example? And by sleuth, I mean, take 20 minutes to dig a little bit deeper into your customers that are commenting, for example. Has anybody ever done that? Glennie, I saw you were shaking your head no. It's not a very common thing. So let's just go over it really quickly, and I can show you guys how we do that for our customers. So this is an example of a customer. We were actually doing an avatar exercise for a client, and we noticed that this particular lady, Janet, was commenting positively on several occasions to our customers' posts. And so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and find out more about her and see if she fit into the existing profile that we had, which would reinforce the avatar that we suspected, or maybe this was a new avatar. So we go into Facebook and we can click on Janet's profile. And a lot of times people don't have their privacy settings on to the extent that that everything is hidden. Sometimes for sure you will see absolutely nothing because the person has their highest level of privacy, but other times they have a public profile, such as the case with this one. So we can, with a little bit of sleuthing, we can quickly see Janet is female, and we can kind of get an idea what her age bracket would be. We can see down here she's retired. We know by her photos, she's a spinner and she has grandkids. And then we can assume she's most likely Democrat because she was super enthusiastic about Joe Biden's interview on PBS. Now, the political bent of your customers probably isn't something you're going to work into any advertising or promotions. But again, I just want to show you where you can pull out information about your customer. So from there, we can create a little profile or a mini avatar when we're talking to Janet. So for example, if we know she's interested in spinning and she likes to travel, we can talk about messaging that refers to taking spindles traveling with her, or making projects for her grandkids, or donating to social causes like charity knitting. Or we can encourage her to start a new hobby in retirement. For example, Susan, I know from having worked with Susan that she's got a brick and mortar shop in Sarasota, Florida, and she mostly carries knitting and fiber art supplies. But I also know that recently she branched into spinning and fiber prep. And so this would be a great example of how, if she's got customers that are already knitters, to branch out to speaking to someone like Janet about all her new spinning equipment and the new drum carders that she has, for example. All right, before we talk about COVID considerations, I just want to say I get this feedback a lot where people are like, oh my gosh, how many avatars am I going to have? And do I need to be that specific for every Janet that I have? And I would say no. We show you the exercise with Janet just to give you an idea of how you begin to collect little snippets of information about who your ideal customer is. And that data will start to aggregate, right? If you do that exercise enough times and you're pulling those data points from different places, not just from Facebook sleuthing, but meeting them in person or talking to them on the phone, or the other things that we talked about, social media and looking at your back-end statistics, you would begin to create an aggregate view of what your customer avatar is. And you would begin to see over time that for the most part, your ideal customer is like Janet. It's mostly female. It's mostly an older demographic. It's mostly somebody that's retired, right? So I don't want to give you the impression that you're going to have, hundreds of individual Janets that you're speaking to, and that every newsletter needs to be geared specifically to that one person. It's not. We pull the lens back and we think about it in more of a big picture aggregate view. So just keep that in mind when you're doing some of that sleuthing. So with COVID considerations, here's a couple of things that I've been thinking about. I do think that you're going to have some commonalities with your customers, like when they come into your brick and mortar shop, they're going to want to see people wearing masks. They're going to want to see visible cleaning. They're going to want to see you enforcing social distancing or maybe foot placements. You might consider plexiglass at your registers and online ordering. I think we've talked about COVID so much now for many, many months. And so I think some of these bullet points are going to be fairly obvious, but I do like to just bring it up again that part of your marketing strategy does need to consider some of these COVID considerations. And lastly, return policies are another thing that you're going to want to take a close look at and possibly tweak for COVID considerations. So I often get this question, what if you have a customer that spans demographics and characteristics and hopes and fears, which are the 4 quadrants that we just talked about at the top. So for example, maybe you have a millennial, a Gen Xer, and a boomer, and they all want project kits that are budget priced for an intermediate knitter. So the idea here is that you might not be able to keep all of those age demographics in the same silo. For example, you might have customers that span. And what do you do about that? So I want to ask, has anybody ever heard of attitudinal segmentation? No, okay. Attitudinal segmentation is a little bit different. This is going to be categories of people based on the attitudes that they hold, not necessarily on demographics. So it reveals the attitudes of the groups of people share and that differentiate them from other groups. So for example, with the folks that wanted more affordable, smaller travel size kits, they all might be in different age demographics. And you'll be marketing to them based on attitudes and not their age. In other words, it'll tell you why they're buying from you and not just who they are. So I want to give you an example of this. And I will say that when we do attitudinal segmenting at Stitchcraft Marketing, we are working with a company called Audience Audit, and they're a third-party company that only works with agencies when they're doing attitudinal survey and segmenting. So if anybody's interested in this, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, but the way that this would work is you would go through us to work with them. So let me give you a quick example of one of these experiences that they they gave us. So for a company that is a home fragrance product manufacturer, for example, they found through their attitudinal segmenting that they had 3 different types of avatars. They had your fragrance lovers, your decorators, and your gifters. So the fragrance lovers were folks that may have spanned all different ages, and they were just buying that product because they loved how it affected their mood, and they were very internally motivated. The decorators, they were buying it for the design and how it looked in their home. And then the gifters were buying it because they were giving that fragrance product to someone else, like a housewarming gift, for example. And they were buying it because they loved how expensive the packaging looked. So you can see one is internally motivated, one is both externally and internally, and then one is completely externally motivated. And I think you kind of get the idea of how this spans all the other avatar characteristics that we talked about. And you can really get a sense of kind of a different person that's buying from your company. This also works with a B2B model. This example is a commercial heavy equipment retailer, like a tractor sales, for example. And this one we found they had 4 different avatars. They had local loyalists, forward thinkers, reluctant replacers, and value seekers. And they all had very different ideas of why they were buying from this company. So for example, the forward thinkers were the folks that were planning ahead. They had to have the latest and greatest. They wanted to be on the cutting edge of everything that was new and cool. And they did a ton of research. Your value seekers, by contrast, were the ones that they only bought tractors when absolutely necessary. They didn't have any planning to it. They trusted expert opinions. They wanted to buy it online, and they did not want to talk to a salesperson. So you can see these 4 are really, really different. And if you're trying to market to just one type of customer, you're going to really miss the nuance between some of these different avatars that can be revealed in your business. So we like to say what truly matters for marketing is the assumptions that the buyers have and their attitudes that are affecting the decisions and problems they're trying to solve. So remember earlier we talked about understanding the hopes and the fears of your avatar. I think that this attitudinal segmenting really digs deep into those 2 quadrants, and you can be the business that solves the problems for these clients. But of course, at first, you need to understand what they are. We find that attitudinal segmenting really has a fantastic ROI. For the home fragrance company, for example, they were able to double their catalog sales, and they increased sales from organic search by 3-fold. And with the heavy equipment company, they had a 400% increase in equipment sales and exceeded their revenue by 45%. And they both did this really by honing in what their message was and being able to attract that certain kind of customer based on what the customer told them they wanted through the surveys that we did. So what really truly matters, like we said, is their assumptions and their attitudes affecting their decisions. So the first part of the customer avatar exercise is super easy for all of you to do. Of course, that's accessible today. We want you to be able to create your Jackie. So we have created a little exercise worksheet for you that Laura will send out to you. If you, I believe we have your emails, she'll get that to you. And then for those of you that are on YouTube, we'll put a link in the description where you can find that exercise. And it essentially walks you through a bunch of different questions that we've put together for each of the 4 quadrants. And you can think about that for yourself. I'd encourage you to get your team together and get their input as well, because they might be seeing something different from you. And I think that after you do that exercise, you should actually name your Jackie. And a lot of customers will choose a name of a client or a customer that is fairly frequent and they think really represents that avatar. For example, for our agency, we have our avatar's name is Carol. And so every time we are talking about new initiatives or really tons of decisions, you know, should we go to that show? Should we write this PDF? Should we do these office hours? What's the podcast topic? We will say, you know, what would Carol want? Or we'll check each other and say, you know, I don't think Carol would really understand that because X, Y, Z. So I would encourage you to actually use the name of your avatar in your business relations and with your employees, and really make her the focus of your marketing plan by using her name.
I'm gonna pop the link for the customer avatar worksheet into the chat. So.
Okay, great. That is going to be in there now for the folks that are online and live today. And we'll provide that link in the YouTube for everyone that's watching this on replay. I believe everybody knows how to get in touch with us, but I'll just throw this up here really quickly. If you would like to reach out to us about this attitudinal segmenting, if it's something you're interested in, we're happy to give you a quote on working with audience audit on that and having that done for your business. And here's my cell and our website if you want some other information. And then we'll jump over to questions. I will stop my share and we'll jump over to that. Of course, if you're interested in asking a question, it can be about the topic today or really anything. You can just unmute yourself and shout out, or if you prefer to go into the chat, you can do that as well. So thanks everybody. I hope that was just short and quick and informational.
I have questions.
Go ahead, Susan.
So if you set up a bunch of different avatars because you have a lot of different segments of customers.
Yeah.
Do you have a way to keep track of that?
Yeah.
Do you set up a spreadsheet with them? Do you?
Yeah. Well, I think I get this question a lot too. How many avatars is common, and can you have more than one? Yes, absolutely. Most people do have more than one avatar. In our industry, I would say the average is 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. So I don't think we need a spreadsheet for that. If you have more than 10 avatars, then you're not niche enough. Then I would ask you the question of why are you trying to serve all the people all the time? You need to niche down more if you find yourself having that many avatars. With 2 or 3 though, I think that's manageable, and you would just customize your messaging and your efforts accordingly. So the example that I usually give is a client that we work with, Eucalan, and we've worked with Eucalan for many, many years now, and they have kind of 3 avatars. I would say they have, for those of you that don't know, Eucalan is a fiber wash product. They have a bunch of other smaller products, but their flagship product is a wash for gentle lingerie and for fiber products and so on. So their one avatar is the person that's using it for knitted and or handmade products like a sweater, a hand knit sweater. Another avatar that they have is what we call baby mama, like this eco baby mama, moms that want to hand wash their children's clothing or cloth diapers. And they tend to be a little bit more environmentally conscious. And then we have a whole other 3rd avatar, which they might not necessarily be parents, but they are this eco-conscious segment, and they're more of like a green consumer. They're buying it because it's made without extra ingredients, and it comes in a neutral scent. One of them does, and you know, they're looking for a product that really fits with their aesthetic. And so we find ourselves with sort of 3 different avatars. And when we go out there with certain messaging and segmenting, we target to those 3 things. So
for that particular client, actually the 3 buckets are slightly different. It's the crafters, you know, and folks who have handmade things. And then it's sort of the eco-friendly mom, that bucket. And then we also have lingerie. It's a delicate wash. So we have actually set up like 3 different segments of people who we know are crafters or are craft retailers, people we know who are lingerie aficionados and lingerie retailers. And then we sort of have a 3rd segment for the moms. We've achieved these segments in part because we've asked, like for the retailers, it's pretty easy because we can self-identify which ones the retailers are, and we definitely do separate retailer sends. The way we segmented some of the audience on the consumer newsletter is that we just tracked who clicked which links and looked at which links were most popular. And honestly, for our newsletter, it's mostly crafters. But that's how we've kind of segmented the population there, and how we target the messages to the 3 different prongs, just to kind of keep them, because somebody who is hand knitting a sweater is not necessarily into cloth diapering their baby.
Right. Yeah, and we'll have different marketing strategies for those 3 different segments, and we can utilize, like I mentioned earlier, like Facebook, for example, we can do filtering really specifically on the back end to do advertisements just for whatever those segments are. Another example, Laura, when you mentioned the lingerie, we do custom articles for the lingerie journal that are specific for that customer and that segment. And so we're using the messaging and the keywords and so on just for that customer. You know, even though all 3 of those customer avatars in the end are buying the same product, it's a different marketing approach depending on the customer. Does that help, Susan?
So it's not always quite that clear cut. Eucaland is
Yeah.
pretty easy because they're like 3 completely different buckets.
Right.
But customers will usually fall into one of a few segments.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Susan, I mean, I'm familiar enough with your business that I can throw out a quick example for you. I mean, some of your avatars might differ in that, you know, you've got your snowbirds, which are going to have different needs and possibly different price points. And like you might need to appeal to them more talking about shipping and shipping promos or what the shipping costs versus the folks that are living in Sarasota and they're your locals and they're walking in the store and they live there year round. So that might be, you know, just a little bit of a differentiator between the 2 segments that you have.
We just put shipping costs back in today. We've been shipping since March, and today they went back in because it's killing us. So today we put in 3 different levels of shipping, and well, we'll see. But I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Shipping.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So.
All right.
Yeah. I had a similar conversation yesterday with Gwen, who you know, and we talked about, and maybe these should be my 2 avatars, customers and consumers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and how you, well, it's how you categorize which people are customers and which ones are consumers. And the consumers, you really, she said, don't worry about your consumers because they usually don't want to spend any money. They just want to come in and look, and they want you to take care of them for free. And they're not the people that you should be concerned about. So it's a little different than what you're talking about.
Okay.
Customers are the ones who are pretty much loyal to you, value your opinion, are supporters, and things like that. But that doesn't mean you can't turn your consumer into a customer.
Right.
So you
You're
don't
nurturing that
your
lead.
consumer, you just see if there's a chance to make them a customer. So
Right. And I would say, think about, you know, in the case of your consumer, if you want to categorize them that way, think about what their hopes and their fears are, because I suspect that if you can really uncover how to be their inspiration or their problem solver, you will more quickly convert them into a customer.
Okay.
When you are the person that solves that problem or inspires them for the next project.
That's a good idea, way to look at them. I'd love to be able to turn them all into customers.
Well, if they're coming
However, some of them you just don't
chance.
have a prayer. Yeah, that's like, no. Go to
Tammy,
Michael.
any questions or comments that you guys have? And Tammy, you weren't here earlier on, but I just mentioned if you want to unmute yourself and jump in, feel free.
I'm looking forward to doing the exercise. It's something I'd like to be able to have that customer persona all figured out, you know, before everything gets too crazy. I think we have a pretty good idea of who our core customer is, but knowing, you know, different demographics and like you said, trying to get your niche is going to be the important part right now, to focus on that. And then you can spread it out a little bit further as you grow.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, everybody. Sorry I was late. What a crazy day today's been.
No worries.
But my question would be, you know, you were talking about the fragrance people. How did they figure out that some people are buying just for the smell. Some people are buying it because it looks nice in their house. And some
Yeah.
people, I don't remember what the third one was, but
Yeah.
you know, I would guess that I have some people that just want to buy stuff because it looks nice instead of, you know, they're collectors of the fabric.
Yeah, totally. That is a
So,
thing. And
yeah.
you might write that off as, oh gosh, that's silly. But I would say in the craft industry, I've been in this industry long enough to know that there are makers and there are collectors, and sometimes they intersect. People just want to buy fabrics because they're beautiful. And again, it goes to that hope. I hope someday I can make a Anna Maria Horner quilt.
Oh my
But I
gosh.
just have that fabric just in case.
I'll never forget the one day I had a customer come in. She was here all the time. She was here at least once a week buying. You know, she didn't leave here under $75 ever. And one day I asked her, well, what have you made lately? And she goes, well, I finished a quilt in 1979. I couldn't believe it. But
Wow.
with regards to the fragrance people, then they had 3 different avatars.
Yeah. So they have 3 different attitudinal segments. And the way that I've done one of these with Susan, who runs the company, for some of our clients. And I can tell you that it is a very extensive, in-depth questionnaire that asks a lot about attitudes. And it's a Likert scale where you would answer, yes, I sort of agree with this, or I don't, or I strongly agree with it. So based on that, and when all the data is compiled, you'll see a scatter plot of attitudes that emerge. And so then what she does is she looks at where the clusters of the data are on the scatter plot around certain attitudes. So for the fragrance lovers, for example, it might have been, you know, that all of the attitudes around fragrance and what their feelings were on why they bought the product. Oh, they loved how it smelled. They loved getting dressed up and going out and putting this on, or that kind of thing. So it's based on the clusters of the responses that she sees in the survey. And the survey is very extensive. And not only does she use like the client's existing customers, but she'll go out and find other data survey sets, respondent sets, so that it's really representative. There's just no doubt in your mind at all that is how the customers are fleshing out. And the other one that you were not recalling was the customers that were buying the fragrance because it looked really expensive and the packaging. And this particular company, I do know from talking with Susan about it, you know, they really stepped up their packaging and created a whole other element of their business, which accounted for that big jump in sales because they nurtured that specific attitudinal segment of the folks that were just buying because it was beautiful. So they increased their packaging and like made the materials a little bit more enriched, and like they really focused on that one avatar, which really worked for them. And they would have never known that if they hadn't done that research.
So I'm sure within the yarn industry, there are, we have in the quilting industry, they do a quilt survey once every couple of years.
Right.
Do you think I can draw my avatar from that information that they've compiled?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to take a look at what the data is. But yeah, I would say if it's anything like, you know, the TNNA survey for the yarn industry that they no longer do. But for a while, they were collecting it every other year, and it did have some really important information. The average spend, for example, you know, so we know, and I can tell you that just from experience, we know that the average spend is about, you know, the sweet spot, $75 to $90 for a kit. And some of that is reinforced by that research because respondents said, you know, what their average spend was in a year. So sometimes you can use that data to reinforce what you're already seeing with your own avatar. And I would probably combine both. I wouldn't just rely on strict industry data to identify what your particular customer is, because it feels a little too general to me. You want to know exactly who your Thimbles customer is.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other comments or questions? Any other questions about anything else that's on your mind or pain points that you ladies are having, particularly this week? Like I said, happy to open it up to any questions that you're having. Nope, everything's good?
Oh no, everything's not good. I wanted to say, where should we start?
Where should you start? You should start by downloading the worksheet.
Yeah.
Again, the link is in the chat.
I already, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I would start with some of the easiest parts. You can do the demographic piece first, and then some of the characteristics. I mean, I think that would be fairly easy for you to put your finger on. I would encourage you to maybe have a team meeting with some of your employees, because if they're on the front lines, at the register, on the floor, in your shop, get some of their input. And maybe talk about some of your more common customers, like what Tammy just said about the customer that spent $75 every time she came in. You can probably describe a lot about who that is. And then you start to wonder, well, do we have other customers like that? Oh yeah, Mary's like that. And George is like that. And you can start to put a cluster of similar characteristics together. My first steps for you would be do the easy stuff, do the low hanging fruit of what you already know in your mind about your customer, and then bring in your employees and ask for some feedback there. Maybe do a little internal exercise over lunch one day. And then as far as the hopes and the fears stuff, again, I would look towards some of your back-end statistics, some of the folks that are visiting your social channels and commenting on your posts. What are they saying? What are they asking? What are they sharing with you that you can draw together to create that profile?
I think it's just so hard to plan, and even if you did that right now, I think that my demographics are changing because of this pandemic. And one of my staff just texted me and said, you know what our hours going to be in the fall? And I want to say, I don't know what they're going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
How do you even, I don't know how I know and everybody's in the same boat, but is there something that can help you figure out, like maybe what your new avatar is, what your new demographic is? I've noticed that we've got a lot of new customers and we don't hear from a lot of old customers.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're in a point with COVID right now where we are seeing a lot of pivoting and a lot of change when it comes to the avatar.
Yeah.
So for example, if you were, I'm going to just make up an example, a predominantly brick and mortar store that completely shut down, is not open right now, and you went to 100% online, or you found that your online sales became really robust due to COVID, then you might find yourself with an emerging avatar, somebody that is very different from your brick and mortar customer. If your brick and mortar customer was not very technologically savvy, for example, that's going to really differ from someone that's jumping into the online sphere and able to quickly and easily purchase something from your web store.
Okay.
And so those are going to, be two different people, and you might start to nurture that emerging avatar. Someone that is
an emerging avatar for us. That's where a lot of the new people have come in.
Right. So again, keep your eyes and your ears to the ground for other aspects of that avatar.
Yeah. Okay.
Piece together, and again, think of it in terms of disparate dots or points. And once you can gather a cluster together, that would be an avatar to create and to start to nurture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Start. Yeah.
All right. Any other feedback, questions, concerns? Of course, I'm available on email or phone if you guys want to explore this further or you need some more help. Feel free to reach out. And thanks so much for joining today. And I guess we'll be back in 2 weeks. Laura, do we have a topic?
Unfortunately, we do not, but we are scheduled for September 8th at 2 p.m. Central, like we normally are, and you'll get a save the date probably later this week or early next week with whatever topic we come up with.
Okay, they've been great topics, Laura. I'm sure it'll be an awesome
And me personally, I love these chats.
Good.
I have gotten a lot out of everyone I've been to. Even if I know
we'll look at what topics we have in the hopper for blog articles, and we'll come up with something.
Yeah, and I would also say if there are specific questions that you want us to cover or topics that you're struggling with, I'm sure that someone else in the industry is having that same concern. So feel free to email me with your topic suggestions.
I like Tammy's comment right now. How to analyze your Google Analytics. What does it mean? How do you get it?
I'll hit Steph up about that one because she's our Google Analytics expert.
No, but I don't know how to. I mean,
That's a good topic. And people don't know where to look. A lot of
Yeah.
the really juicy Google Analytics stats are buried within different hierarchical navigation buttons, at least I find.
I know I use them. I mean, I know they're there, but I've no.
And how to analyze them and figure out what to do with them, how to apply what you learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good, Laura. I can see her typing quickly. She's probably adding that in, and we'll brainstorm about how to bring that to you, hopefully in September.
Great.
All right. Sounds good, ladies. Thanks again for your time today,
Okay.
and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.